Hey, my name is Lisa and I'm a freelance fashion illustrator. In today's video, I'm gonna share with you my story of how I wanted to find a creative hobby, which then ended up being my career path. So let's start. So starting from the very beginning, being a kid, I never really drew people, even relatives for their birthdays. So instead, I used to draw animals, monsters, then architecture later on, practicing urban sketching, but nothing close to anatomy. At the age of 7, I started attending art classes, where we would do still lifes paintings and a little bit of ceramics. Then in high school, I was really into the idea of becoming an architect, but unfortunately I didn't get a scholarship and instead I decided to go for an industrial design degree. I fell in love with industrial design from the very beginning, and already during my sophomore year, I started working on freelance basis. As industrial design is a very technical field, close to engineering, I soon realized that it's becoming a little overwhelming for me to spend every single day on the technical aspects of physical products. I then realized that I needed to find a creative hobby that would just simply help me relax. And to be honest, I didn't really know what to start with because I tried different things, including animation, abstract art, painting, etc. But all of these fields require you to have years of experience to become really good at it. And that's understandable, but this didn't meet my criteria for a creative hobby because I just simply wanted something for a quick practice, for daily basis, but something that would turn out to be much easier than like spending years on mastering the skills. And then at that time, I suddenly discovered fashion illustration through Instagram. So I started following a couple of fashion illustrators, and they really inspired me to try this thing because fashion illustrations seemed very easy, very stylish, and fast to complete, which was all of the criteria I was looking for in a creative hobby. And for me, it didn't feel like I would have to spend like years mastering the very basic skills to start doing this thing, you know? And plus, it was also a commercial thing, so just an idea of having a little bit of an extra income from doing this thing potentially in the future was great to have in mind. So I didn't start with any particular fashion illustration courses. I just really started doodling on random pieces of paper every now and then, and once I mastered a little bit of fashion proportions, I started applying watercolor into my doodles, and this was something that I started with. These were the first pieces that I started sharing on Instagram, and further on, it started paying off. Apart from Instagram, I also started uploading some of my illustrations on freelance platforms, which I was already using at that time as an industrial designer to get client work. So I had rating, and it wasn't like I was starting from scratch. No, my design rating was something that really helped me get my first illustration clients because the rating is not really dedicated to a particular field that you work in, but it's just the rating of your profile, basically. And a couple of months later, after I started posting my illustrations on those websites, I started getting client requests from startup brands who would like to illustrate their ideas of some apparels which they would like to manufacture later on. So what helped me a lot in the very beginning to learn more about fashion illustration were a couple of commissions that I got from fashion design, students who had fashion illustration classes, but they didn't really have time for doing that, or wish, I don't know. So they would pay me for doing their fashion illustration home task for them. And to be honest, that was exactly what I needed, because I didn't have any fashion illustration classes in my life. So these students would give me the task that their professors would give them, and I would do the home task for them. They would pay me for that. Then their professor would send me feedback, and I would apply the changes required. And this was a perfect way of learning for me, because obviously I was even paid for doing home tasks that I would probably pay for learning, you know? So this is how I learned a lot of basics of fashion illustration, fashion figure, how to illustrate patterns and different body types. So yes, that was exactly what I needed. I did my first fashion illustrations on paper using watercolor, color pencils, and markers. Then I would scan these illustrations and send them over to my clients. And in the very beginning, that was perfectly fine, because my dad had a fancy printer for his professional stuff, and I would use his printer to scan my works. And it was perfectly fine, because the resolution and colors were everything like in the original. But then, sometime later, this printer died, and he got a new one, a cheaper version of the same company, but it wasn't even close to what we had before. And I had to do something with it. In the very beginning, I used to do some touches on Adobe Photoshop to adjust some things, but the colors were so ugly, not even close to the original. So at that time, I already saved some money, and I bought myself an iPad. So then, after buying an iPad, I had to start learning how to apply colors from the very beginning, because digital and traditional illustrations are completely different things. And this would only be understood by somebody who has gone through this himself. But obviously, iPad was a great thing that changed my illustration life, because obviously you save a lot of time on drawing figures, because you just duplicate them and that's it. It's also much faster and much doable, I would say, to apply changes, especially when you do client work, because you are fine with applying changes in watercolor yourself, but if the color should be changed or something should be added, it's getting very hard if you work with traditional materials. So an iPad was definitely a great thing to have. So as I said, iPad have saved me a lot of time on redrawing figures and scanning. And of course, the quality of the work is much higher than after scanning the traditional illustration if you don't have a fancy printer. So then I continued working with new clients, providing them with some fashion illustrations for their businesses, not only fashion brands, but also different companies, even including some medical ones, because everybody needs illustration for their website or gift cards or whatever. Fashion illustration is not only a small field related to fashion brands, you know. I got to meet a couple of clients who became my full-time clients, so whenever they need to illustrate a new collection, they would reach out to me and we would do the whole thing at a time. Obviously, fashion illustration for me is a side hustle, because my main job is industrial design and partly graphic design as well. But I'm very excited to have this side hustle of mine, because it really helps me relax from my engineering work as a day job and just really take time to create some art. Very simple, very minimalistic, but very freehand art. So this was all I wanted to share in this video. If you want to check out my illustrations, you can check out my Instagram account, which will be linked down below. And thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more fashion illustration, design, and everything related to this field in the next videos. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.